Passenger shouted, "Go back to Africa." Minutes later, the black CEO took the pilot's seat. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. The terminal was quiet, just the low hum of rolling suitcases and coffee machines hissing in rhythm. Then a voice tore through it like glass shattering. Go back to Africa. Heads turned. Conversations froze. A man in a beige suit, face flushed with the confidence of someone never told no, stood glaring at a woman in an orange pinstripe blazer. He wasn't whispering. He wanted witnesses. She didn't move, didn't blink. Only one brow lifted, slow and deliberate. Around them, the crowd split in half, the curious and the uncomfortable. Security guards looked at each other, unsure whose side to take. The man jabbed a finger toward her chest. You people always cutting the line, thinking you own the place. His words carried the kind of poison that hides behind fake smiles at company parties. The woman said nothing. Her silence worked harder than any curse. She adjusted her sleeve, the orange fabric catching the airport light like fire. Behind her, a pilot in full uniform hesitated mid-step, recognizing her but staying quiet. Not yet. Sir, she said calmly. Please remove your hand. Or what? He sneered, stepping closer. The air shifted. A few passengers raised their phones. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Another muttered, "He'll regret that." But the man didn't stop. He grabbed her wrist. "You don't belong here." That's when the silence hit. Every sound in the terminal folded into a single heartbeat. She looked down at his hand, then up into his eyes. No anger, no fear. Just authority he didn't recognize. "Let go," she said. Her voice was low, but it carried across the terminal like thunder muffled by glass. He hesitated, surprised that she didn't flinch. A gate agent started to move, then stopped when she saw the pilot watching. He shook his head slightly as if to say, "Wait." The woman straightened her collar. Her expression didn't change, but her presence did. The temperature seemed to drop. The kind of cold that comes from power held steady. "You think you can walk in here dressed like that and fly on my flight?" The man spat. She tilted her head, studying him. "Your flight?" "Yeah," he said proudly. "I'm platinum status. They know me here." Her lips curved, not a smile, but something sharper. "Good," she said. "Then you'll recognize my voice later." He frowned, confused. But she was already turning away, pulling out her ID card, the one no one in the crowd could quite see yet. The pilot behind her cleared his throat. "Captain Carter," he said quietly, "we're ready when you are." Every head turned again. The man blinked. "Captain," he repeated, voice cracking. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply looked over her shoulder, eyes steady tone, calm enough to slice marble. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Her gaze returned to him. Now let's get back to your flight. And just like that, the silence in the terminal began to feel very, very small. Ava Carter had walked through hundreds of airports before, but this one felt different. Not because of the insult, it wasn't new, but because of the silence that followed it. Every whisper, every side glance, every half-hidden phone camera carried a question she'd heard her entire life. How did she get here? She adjusted the strap of her carry-on and kept moving. No security detail, no assistant trailing behind. Just her, a black leather case, and the kind of posture that said she didn't need permission to be anywhere. At gate 42, an airline supervisor rushed over, clearly flustered. "Madame, do you need help finding your flight?" Ava smiled politely. "No, thank you. I know exactly where I'm going." The woman hesitated, eyes darting to the crew badge half hidden beneath Ava's blazer. It glinted once under the fluorescent light, Captain Ava Carter, Skylinks Airlines. But the supervisor didn't read the name. She only saw the color of the hand holding it. Ava didn't correct her. She'd learned long ago that some lessons were best delivered in silence. 10 years earlier, she'd been just another student pilot, one of 2 black women in a class of 80. The instructor had smiled when he said, "Statistically, you won't make it to cockpit command." She remembered that smile every time someone doubted her now. It wasn't cruel. It was worse certain. She made a promise then, if the world kept trying to seat her in the back, she'd build her own airline and fly from the front. The terminal announcer broke her thoughts. Skylinks Flight 208 to New York now boarding. The same flight. Her flight. Ava's fingers brushed the embossed Skylinks logo on her ID. Not a souvenir, her signature. She glanced toward the gate again. The man from before was now at the front of the line, still muttering to anyone who'd listen. Crazy, right? They let anyone in first class these days. He didn't notice the quiet pilot who walked past him. He didn't see the captain's wings clipped to her lapel, and he definitely didn't see the subtle nod from the flight crew as she approached the jet bridge. Inside the narrow corridor, the air smelled of fuel and coffee. Her heels clicked softly against the metal floor. At the door to the cockpit, First Officer Ramirez stood waiting. "Rough morning?" he asked, voice low. "Nothing new," Ava said. "Same flight, different sky." He grinned. "Passengers already giving you trouble, one in particular," she replied. "Front of the cabin. Beige suit louder than the engines." Ramirez chuckled under his breath. "Want me to handle him?" "No," Ava said, sliding into the pilot's seat. "We'll let gravity handle him." Her hands moved across the control panel with the ease of muscle memory. Every switch, every screen familiar as her own heartbeat. She exhaled slowly, gaze steady through the windshield where dawn was breaking over the tarmac. Behind her, a flight attendant whispered, "Captain Carter, they're still boarding." "Good," Ava said. "Then he'll have a front row seat for what respect looks like." She reached for the headset, the metal cool against her skin. "Skylinks 208 requesting clearance," she said into the mic. The tower responded immediately. "Clear for departure, Captain Carter. Good to have you back." A small smile touched her lips. She'd left the corporate office last week to return to the cockpit for one reason, to remind herself where it all started. And maybe she thought to remind others that power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears wings. From the terminal window, the man in beige watched the crew move around the plane. He pointed, laughing, to another passenger. "Wouldn't it be something if that woman actually worked here?" The boarding door closed. The engines roared to life. And the woman he'd told to go back to Africa rested her hand on the throttle, perfectly calm. Next stop, altitude. And Justice cruising steady at 3,000 feet. Cabin lights dimmed to a soft gold as passengers found their seats. Luggage compartments thudded shut, seat belts clicked, and the air filled with that mix of recycled oxygen and quiet entitlement. The man in beige dropped heavily into 2A first class. His smirk hadn't softened since the terminal. He leaned toward the flight attendant. "Make sure that woman doesn't end up sitting near me," he said. "You saw her mouthy one in the orange jacket." The attendant's polite smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, sir." What he didn't notice was the small glance she gave toward the cockpit where the orange jacket now hung neatly behind the captain's seat. Ava Carter sat inside the narrow chamber of buttons and light, the calm center of an engine built for chaos. Through the half-open door, she could hear muffled laughter, his voice again loud and certain. Ramirez adjusted his headset. "Everything checks out, Captain. Let's keep it that way," Ava said. She flicked a switch, eyes scanning the instruments. Each green light was a heartbeat, steady, obedient. Nothing like people. In the cabin, the man reclined, pulling out his phone. He typed furiously into a social media post. "Some diversity hire tried to cut me off at the gate today. Airlines these days, no standards." He tagged the airline. Skylinks. The irony would age poorly. A woman across the aisle read the post, frowned, and quietly started recording. Her husband whispered, "Leave it." She didn't. Ava's voice came over the intercom, smooth, professional, the kind of voice built to steady turbulence and silence arrogance. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Skylinks Flight 208 to New York." The man froze. The voice. He knew that voice. "Captain Carter and our crew are honored to have you with us. Flight time will be approximately 5 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey." His face went pale. The woman across the aisle lowered her phone, slowly, lips curling into a grin. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked sweetly. That can't be her." "You mean the woman you yelled at?" she said. "Sounds like she's flying the plane." The man swallowed hard. "That's impossible." But the engines roared, the cabin tilted slightly, and every passenger felt the weight of takeoff. In the cockpit, Ava kept her focus on the horizon. "Altitude 10,000, climbing steady," Ramirez reported. "Copy that," Ava replied. Her tone didn't change, but inside a small flame of satisfaction burned quiet and bright. She remembered her first solo flight, a storm over Atlanta, visibility near zero. Her instructor's voice crackling through the radio. "You're too soft-spoken, Carter. Command the air or it'll command you." She had learned. She commanded everything now. Back in first class, the man in beige pressed the call button repeatedly. A chime echoed. "Yes, sir," the flight attendant asked. "I'd like to speak to the captain." "She's occupied," the attendant said deliberately. "Then tell him that I have a complaint." She blinked once slowly. "Her, sir?" "The captain is a she." He shifted uncomfortably. That's not what I meant." "Of course not," she said, voice level, "but she'll still hear you loud and clear." Her smile lingered as she walked away. Ava caught the exchange through the intercom feed. She didn't react. She didn't need to. Instead, she checked the course correction, leaned back, and said quietly, "Sometimes turbulence comes from inside the cabin." Ramirez smirked. "Want me to activate the seatbelt sign early? Let him squirm a little longer," Ava said. "We'll level out soon enough." From 35000 feet, the clouds looked soft, forgiving, nothing like the world below. Ava stared at the endless blue, thinking how prejudice sounded the same everywhere, loud, lazy, and predictable. And yet she never stopped flying above it. The intercom crackled again, faint chatter from the cabin, a passenger laughing, another whispering. "That's her," she exhaled. The noise didn't bother her, it never did. Because she knew what was coming next. The higher they climbed, the smaller his world would get. At 30,000 feet, the cabin settled into a hush. The seatbelt sign dimmed. Trays clinked open. The hum of the engines became a kind of white noise, steady, hypnotic. But tension still lingered, like static, invisible but everywhere. The man in beige reclined in his seat, pretending to nap, but his jaw was tight. He checked his phone again, no signal, no audience. He was alone with the echo of his own words. A flight attendant named Maya Ruiz, barely 24, moved down the aisle, collecting glasses. She'd been watching him since boarding, the way his smirk curdled into unease, the way other passengers looked at him, then looked away. She'd also seen Captain Carter step into the cockpit before departure. Maya knew that name. Every young pilot in training did. Ava Carter, the first black woman to own and fly under her own airline. Maya had written an essay about her once in flight school, long before she ever dreamed of wearing a Skylinks uniform. Now here she was, mid-air, watching the same woman being silently judged by a man who had no idea who sat behind the cockpit door. As Maya approached row 2, the man looked up. "Water," he barked. She poured a glass. "Here you go, sir." He squinted at her name tag. "You one of her people, too?" Maya paused. "Her people, you know," he said, lowering his voice like a secret. The diversity crowd. "Everyone's got a quota now." Her throat tightened, but her voice stayed level. "We don't fly quotas, sir. We fly planes." A few passengers nearby glanced up. One woman mouthed, "Thank you." The man shifted, muttering something about respect and the old days. Maya didn't move on. She looked straight at him, tone calm but sharp enough to cut through recycled air. "You want respect? You start by giving it to the woman keeping you alive at 30,000 feet. The row behind her gasped softly. Someone whispered, "Did she just say that?" The man's eyes widened. "You can't talk to me like that. I'll file a complaint." "Already filed," she said, evenly nodding toward the camera phones now quietly recording. "Except it's your behavior being logged." His mouth opened, then closed again. In the cockpit, Ava heard the faint murmur through the comms, Maya's voice calm, unwavering. Ramirez turned slightly, brow raised. "Crew conflict?" "No," Ava said, a trace of pride curling through her voice. "Crew courage." She switched to the cabin channel, not to intervene, but to listen. Maya straightened her shoulders. "Sir, I'll be honest," she said quietly, leaning closer so only he could hear. "I used to think people like you could ruin a whole flight. Now I realize you just expose yourselves." Then she smiled politely, the professional kind that ends a conversation without needing words. "Enjoy your drink." As she turned to leave, a light applause rippled from the nearby seats, soft, restrained, but real. The kind that says, "We saw what you did and we're with you." The man flushed crimson. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Yes," said the woman across the aisle. "It really is." She lifted her phone again, recording as he sank deeper into his seat. In the cockpit, Ava switched off the intercom and let out a slow breath. "She's good," Ramirez said. "She's better than good," Ava replied. "She's what comes next." For a long moment, the only sound was the steady rhythm of the engines. Ava's eyes stayed on the horizon, but her mind wandered to her own first flight as a crew member, how she'd once stood in Maya's shoes, silent, burning inside. She'd promised herself that someday someone like her wouldn't have to stay quiet, and here it was unfolding without her lifting a finger. In the cabin, Maya walked back down the aisle, head high, tray steady. A little boy by the window whispered to his mother, "Mom, she's brave." The woman smiled. "She is." The moment was small, but the energy shifted. The air felt lighter, the kind of light that comes after a storm when people start to realize the rain wasn't endless. In the cockpit, Ava smiled faintly. "Witnesses," she said softly. "Sorry," Ramirez asked. "Justice always needs witnesses," she said. "Otherwise, it's just survival." She tightened her grip on the throttle as turbulence flickered through the clouds, light, harmless, almost poetic. Outside, the horizon stretched wide and gold. Inside, every passenger now knew what dignity looked like, and the flight, once ordinary, had quietly become a lesson at 30,000 feet. The clouds outside thickened, glowing white against the sun. Inside the cabin, the air turned heavier, not from altitude but from pride, bruised and cornered. The man in beige had been quiet for nearly half an hour. Too quiet. He watched the flight attendants move with calm precision, watched Maya walk by without looking at him. Every small act of composure felt like a challenge. He pressed the call button again. Ding. The same polite chime as before, but this time no one hurried. When Maya finally approached, he didn't ask for water. "You think you're smart, don't you?" he said. "All of you." She tilted her head. "All of us, sir?" "Yeah," he sneered. "People like you. Think you can just come and change everything, make us feel bad for being normal." Maya didn't answer. Passengers began to stir, sensing something about to break. He leaned closer, his whisper sharp and venomous. "You're just lucky someone gave you a uniform. None of you belong here. Not her, not you. You people don't fly planes. You serve drinks." The words hit like cold air in a pressurized cabin. Even the engines seemed to hush for a second. A woman across the aisle gasped. "That's enough," she said. But he didn't stop. "And that so-called captain, she's probably a PR stunt. They'll let anyone touch the controls now. Hell, maybe next time I'll be flying the plane." The laughter that followed was his alone. No one joined. And yet for a moment he looked satisfied, like the noise had made him feel big again. In the cockpit, Ava's hand froze over the throttle. She'd been monitoring the intercom feed. She'd heard every word. The rhythm of her breathing changed, steady, measured, dangerous. Ramirez glanced over. "Captain, I'm fine," she said, though her jaw was tight. But she wasn't fine. Not because the insult was new, it wasn't. Because it sounded exactly like one she'd heard 16 years ago. Flashback. She was 19, a trainee at flight school in Dallas. Rain hammered the tarmac. The air smelled of fuel and rust. She'd just passed her simulator exam, perfect score, the only woman in her group to do it. But when she walked into the instructor's office, the man behind the desk didn't look impressed. "Carter," he said, flipping through her file. "You've got the hands for this, but not the look. Airlines want someone who fits the image. You understand?" She didn't. Not then. He leaned back, smirking. "Maybe try ground operations. You'll still be part of the team." That night, she sat in her car in the parking lot until sunrise, watching planes take off, every one of them piloted by someone who looked the part. Her tears dried before dawn. And somewhere between exhaustion and fury, she decided, if they won't let me fit the image, I'll change the frame. Back in the present, the plane hit a pocket of turbulence. Ava's grip tightened. The cabin jolted. Gasps echoed. Drinks spilled. The seatbelt sign blinked on. A calm voice filled the speakers, her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing light turbulence. Everything is under control." Under control. 2 words that had followed her like a vow. She looked at Ramirez. "You have control for a minute," she said. He nodded, confused but trusting. Ava unbuckled, stood, and stepped out of the cockpit. The crew froze when they saw her emerge, the captain walking down the aisle mid-flight. Her presence rippled through the cabin like gravity shifting. The man in beige looked up, startled. "Wait, you're Captain Carter?" she said evenly. "Yes." The murmurs grew, camera phones lifted. She stopped right beside him, voice calm enough to silence the engines. "You wanted to file a complaint?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "You called my crew diversity hires. You said I didn't belong." Her gaze never wavered. "You're flying 30,000 feet in the air right now alive because of people like us." His lips trembled. "I didn't mean—" "You did," she interrupted softly. "You meant every word." She turned slightly, looking at the watching passengers. "You all heard him. I don't need to raise my voice. Truth travels faster than sound." The cabin went silent. For a heartbeat, even the sky seemed to pause. Ava straightened, eyes steady. "Fasten your seatbelt, sir. We're still climbing." Then she turned and walked back toward the cockpit, heels clicking like punctuation marks. Every step said what words no longer needed to. Ava returned to the cockpit without a word. Every eye in the cabin followed her until the door closed. and locked with a heavy click. Inside, the hum of the engines felt louder, sharper, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. Ramirez turned in his seat. "Captain, you okay?" "Perfectly," she said, slipping her headset back on. Her tone was ice and oxygen, cold, clean, necessary. He hesitated. "That looked like correction," Ava said. "That was leadership." Her fingers danced across the control panel. Then she opened a secure channel on her screen labeled Sky Clear Protocol. A small blue icon blinked. Internal Ethics Incident Report, LIV. "Control, this is Captain Carter," she said evenly. "Activating Sky Clear. Timestamp 1442. Passenger misconduct, verbal assault, racial targeting recorded and witnessed." The tower replied instantly, professional but careful. "Copy that, Captain. Confirming Sky Clear. Internal review team notified." All channels encrypted. Ava nodded once. "Good. Let's make this educational." In the cabin, a subtle tone chimed over the PA system. "This flight is being monitored for quality and safety assurance." Passengers glanced at each other. Some smiled faintly, already guessing what was happening. Maya moved quietly through the aisle, collecting trash, whispering to the others. "Keep your phones steady. She's handling it." The man in beige shifted nervously in his seat, suddenly aware of every camera still pointed his way. "What's going on?" he muttered. "Why are people filming?" The woman across the aisle leaned forward, voice cool. "Because you're trending, sir." He looked around, dozens of faces watching, silent, unimpressed. No shouting, no chaos. Just judgment, clean and precise. Back in the cockpit, Ramirez glanced at his captain. "You really built a system for this?" Ava's lips curved. "Not for this. For them. For anyone who ever got humiliated and told to be professional while swallowing their dignity." She paused, eyes flicking to the window where clouds rolled like slow thunder. "Now we don't swallow it. We document it." Her hand hovered over the PA switch. "Time to remind them who's flying this plane." The speakers crackled to life. Her voice came through, steady, low, impossible to ignore. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain again. We've encountered some unexpected turbulence, not from the weather, but from words." Passengers stilled. "As we move forward, I want to make something clear. Respect is not optional on this flight. Not for my crew, not for my passengers, not for me." The man in beige sank into his seat. Maya stopped in the aisle, eyes glistening. Someone started clapping softly, a rhythm that spread like sparks through dry air. Ava let it fade, then added one last line. "If anyone feels uncomfortable with that, you're welcome to disembark when we land." The cabin erupted in quiet laughter and scattered applause. Ramirez chuckled, shaking his head. "That's going viral in 5 minutes." Gudava said, "Let it fly." She keyed her mic to private. "Control, confirm media blackout until official release." "Confirmed, Captain. Company PR in standby. CEO override authorized." Ramirez blinked. "You just gave yourself permission." "I built the system," she replied. "I don't ask for it." The clouds thinned, revealing a horizon streaked with gold and violet. Ava leaned back, voice calm again. "Ramirez, maintain altitude. I'll handle debrief when we land." "Copy, Captain." She closed her eyes for a second, just long enough to let the adrenaline settle. Every insult, every assumption, every time she'd been told to wait her turn, it all led here. Now, 35,000 feet above the world that doubted her, she was rewriting the rule book in real time. And she didn't need anger to do it, only authority and proof. In first class, Maya bent slightly to the man in beige. "Sir, just so you know," she said softly, "all Skylink's flights record passenger conduct during Sky Clear activation. For your safety and ours." He swallowed hard. "This is harassment," he hissed. "No," she replied, calm as gravity. "This is accountability." Back in the cockpit, Ava watched the plane's trajectory stabilize. Her voice softened. "Under control," she whispered again. But this time the words didn't sound like a flight command. They sounded like a promise. The plane cut through the upper atmosphere, sunlight pouring in like liquid gold. The seatbelt sign went off with a soft ding, but no one moved. Something in the air had changed, calm, electric waiting. In first class, the man in beige stared at the glowing screen on the bulkhead. It displayed the airline's emblem, a sleek silver falcon with 2 words underneath. Skylinks Airlines. The intercom clicked again. "Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain speaking." The voice was calm, too calm. A tone you could trust, but this time it carried something else, something final. "You may have noticed earlier that our flight experienced a minor disruption. For transparency, I want to clarify that the situation has been documented and reviewed through our internal system." She paused. The silence in the cabin felt like the moment before lightning strikes. As some of you may know, I'm Captain Ava Carter. What you might not know, her voice sharpened, controlled, is that I'm also the Chief Executive Officer of Skylinks Airlines. The sound that followed wasn't gasps, it was breath. Every passenger inhaled at once. Maya's hand froze midair. Ramirez glanced sideways, the faintest smile breaking across his face. The same company whose safety, integrity, and dignity you trusted when you stepped aboard today. The man in beige sat rigid, color draining from his face. Someone behind him whispered, "She owns the airline." Phones lifted again quietly, reverently. Ava continued, voice smooth as glass. "This aircraft, this crew, and this system exist because people like us refuse to let noise define ability." She let that hang there. "So to the passenger who questioned who belongs up here, let me assure you, sir." A pause. "We all do. But respect is still a non-negotiable ticket." The cabin erupted not with chaos but applause. It wasn't loud. It was solid. Applause that sounded like validation long overdue. In the cockpit, Ramirez leaned back. "You just went from captain to legend," he said. "Not yet," Ava replied. "Legends are written by those who listen. Let's make sure they heard." She tapped a control on her tablet. A soft chime echoed through the plane, followed by an announcement from the crew system. Skylinks acknowledges and enforces its zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and harassment. All incidents are recorded and reviewed directly by our CEO, Captain Ava Carter. Every monitor in the cabin displayed her name. The logo glowed brighter, a falcon spreading its wings over the sky. Maya, standing in the aisle, couldn't hold back a smile. Passengers looked from her to the cockpit door, understanding dawning. One older man reached across the aisle and said quietly, "I've been flying 40 years. Never seen anything like that." Maya nodded. "That's the point, sir." The man in beige finally spoke, his voice shaking. "I didn't know." The woman beside him raised an eyebrow. "That's the problem. You never ask before you judge." He looked toward the cockpit door, but it remained closed, cold, unbothered, absolute. "I didn't mean to. You did," the woman cut in softly. "But now you'll remember who flew you home." He lowered his head. For once, silence was the only apology he had left. In the cockpit, Ava's fingers rested lightly on the throttle. Outside, the horizon stretched endless and forgiving. "Control," she said into the headset. "This is Captain Carter. Incident resolved. Sky clear, complete. Copy that, Captain," came the response. "Your protocol's impressive." "It's not a protocol," she said quietly. "It's a mirror. It shows people who they are." Ramirez exhaled, looking out at the sun-washed sky. "You think he'll change?" "Maybe," Ava said. "But the world watching, they already did." The cameras were still rolling. But this time, no one was recording out of shock. They were recording history. And somewhere between 30,000 feet and the clouds, she'd once been told, she'd never reach, Ava Carter had turned humiliation into altitude. The plane sailed steady toward New York, cutting through the light like truth finally given wings. The applause in the cabin faded into an almost sacred quiet. You could feel it, that collective exhale when justice finally lands. The man in beige sat, rigid eyes darting toward the cockpit door, then to Maya, then back again. He looked smaller now, the kind of small that has nothing to do with size and everything to do with shame. His phone buzzed against the tray table screen, lighting up with messages. "You're on video." "Is this you?" "Bro, she's the CEO." He turned the phone face down. Too late. Maya, standing a few rows away, had seen it all. "Sir," she said softly, "company protocol requires a statement when a sky-clear report is filed. You can do that with me now." He swallowed, voice shaking. "I'd rather not." "You already did," she said gently. On camera. The rows around him were silent. No one gloating, no mockery. Just the quiet dignity that always follows the truth. In the cockpit, Ava scanned the dashboard. The flight was steady, every system green, every heartbeat in rhythm. She'd done this 1,000 times, corrected turbulence, calmed storms, but this calm was different. It felt earned. Ramirez broke the silence. "Ground control's asking if you want security waiting when we land." "Yes," Ava said, "but not to punish him." He looked puzzled. "Then for what?" "For conversation," she said. "He'll get a lesson before he gets off this plane." Back in the cabin, a mother whispered to her teenage daughter. "That's her, the CEO." The girl's eyes shone. "She looks normal. That's power, honey. The real kind never needs to shout." Maya moved through the aisle one last time, collecting empty glasses. Each passenger she passed gave a small nod, not of pity but of respect. She'd become part of the story now, and she knew it. At row 2, the man fumbled with his seatbelt. "I can apologize to her," he muttered. Just tell her I didn't mean it. Captain Carter's busy flying your plane," Maya replied. "But she already heard you. The whole world did." The intercom crackled one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ava's voice filled the cabin calm as sunrise. "We'll begin our descent soon. Please make sure your seatbelts are fastened and your hearts are light." "I trust they are." Soft laughter rippled through the plane. Even the tension seemed to sigh. Ramirez looked over, grinning. "You just turned turbulence into a sermon." "No," Ava said. "Just a standard in-flight correction." As the aircraft broke through the clouds, sunlight washed across the cabin like redemption itself. Below the city shimmered in gold, a new day rising beneath her wings. Ava touched the captain's pin on her uniform. It had been polished so many times over the years, but this was the first time it truly gleamed. "Altitude, steady," Ramirez said. "So is faith," she replied. And somewhere between gravity and grace, everyone on that flight understood the loudest power is quiet, and the highest seat doesn't always belong to the loudest voice. The runway stretched out beneath them like a ribbon of light. Engines hummed lower, softer, the kind of sound that means it's almost over. Ava guided the aircraft down with one hand, her other resting gently on the throttle. Her movements were calm, precise, unhurried. No one watching would have guessed that the woman behind that calm had just rewritten what leadership looked like. "Landing gear deployed," Ramirez said. "Copy," Ava replied. "Let's take her home." The plane kissed the ground, smooth, deliberate, and the cabin erupted in quiet applause. Not the awkward kind passengers give after a flight, but something else. It sounded like gratitude. Through the speakers, Ava's voice returned, low, steady, full of grace. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. For those continuing your journey with Skylinks, I thank you for trusting us and for remembering that respect like safety is part of every successful landing." The words weren't corporate. They were personal. She signed off with the calm confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. "This is Captain Carter signing off." The cabin lights brightened. Passengers gathered their belongings in silence that felt almost reverent. Maya opened the cockpit door. "Captain Security's ready," she said quietly. "He's waiting." Ava nodded. "Let him wait a minute longer." She straightened her jacket and stepped into the aisle. Phones lifted again, but this time no one was chasing a scandal. They were capturing grace. She stopped beside the man in beige, who now looked nothing like the man from the terminal. He struggled to meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, voice small. Ava studied him, then simply nodded. "Apology accepted," she said. "But remember, forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. It's accountability that keeps planes and people from crashing." He nodded weakly, eyes glistening. Ava turned to the rest of the cabin. "Thank you for flying with us," she said softly. "You were all witnesses today, not to me, to what respect can do when it finally takes the pilot's seat." Someone started clapping again. This time it spread like sunlight over water. As the passengers disembarked, Maya lingered near the door. "Captain, can I say something?" "Of course. I joined this job because of you. I just didn't think I'd meet you like this." Ava smiled, the kind of smile that comes from knowing a cycle has finally broken. "Then I guess we both showed up for the right flight." Maya blinked back tears. "You didn't raise your voice once." Ava looked out at the tarmac where dawn spilled gold across the horizon. "No," she said quietly. "I didn't raise my voice. A beat. I raised the standard." The camera would have ended there, a long shot of the captain standing in the cockpit doorway, sunlight flooding through the cabin. But if you stayed 1 second longer, you'd hear her whisper to herself. "Justice doesn't need noise. It just needs altitude." The door closed, and the world watching, recording, remembering, rose a little higher with her.